YouTube. That's what I do sometimes when it's not working.
Oh, looks like it might work. All right, we are live. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Okay, excellent. You can call me Rain Man because my brain is autistic and I like to dance naked in the rain. I don't count toothpicks or perform other party tricks for neurotypicals. I'd rather twist my words into absurd sculptures of sound, spinning them around until I found a way to say what it's like to pray every day for friends to play with who will not ghost me if I text more than I'm supposed to, when I feel closer to someone than they feel to me, and I make things way too real, way too quick, and the words I say are too thick, and nitpicky, prickly sticklers think I'm up to trickery when I'm literally just being me, not even knowing what that means, just that I like the way the air feels between my eyes and your eyes when you don't look away, when you stay long enough to brave my rough, awkward, clumsy that some people call creepy because I'm too deep for them. I'm not going to be a cup of tea if you want Earl Grey. The body I was given is at least half gay because that's the way God made me in her image. God didn't give me such a strange mind because God's unkind, but because she's even weirder than I am, with blue lipstick and glitter in my mustache, in a Mardi Gras dress with butterfly wings that stings sometimes. When people tell me to stop reading them my poetry and sing less loudly, I'm an artist in search of epic adventure. That's why I've been censored by church officials who are incensed by my queer body and my prophetic proclivities. They call it iniquity when I'm literally just being me, not even knowing what I am or whether there's a plan for any of this, or are we just making it up as we go along like an improvised song that gets so many words wrong and keeps trying to end strong. I just want to belong somewhere. I don't care where it is or who it's with. I'm searching for a hidden family of weirdos like me. And each time that I find a new sister or brother or sibling, they're completely unbothered by me. And they'd rather share art with me than spend all their time looking at the screens that erase the unseen world beyond them as though all of reality could be absorbed into the World Wide Web. I'd rather walk through dozens of spider webs than let the internet suck my soul dry like a giant tarantula. Sometimes I feel like a tarantula, just wanting to bide my time unsupervised and disguised. At least then I wouldn't be despised. But I've realized I have wise words to preach. I want to reach the other weirdos like me, the other not quite boys and not quite girls like me, because we have things to teach everyone. And I'm learning how to be just me. And I'm they, them because, not just because of where I am with my gender, but because there's more than one version of me inside of me. I've got boys and girls alike in my costume closet. And I'll pull out whichever one I feel like whenever I feel like it. I think I'm done. I just started going on a little bit at the end. Thank you for listening. I think I messed up a few times, but it's okay.
Okay.
Hey guys. Yeah, I have a poem I did myself. I wrote it actually just today. It's definitely on the subject. So yeah, I called it inversion. So check it out. Here it goes. Transformation From male to female, female to male, or something in between? What does it entail? Mindset metamorphosis, mingling with in control characteristics, variables veritable, gold mine of self-reflection, wellspring of inner child. For pundits on talk shows percolate with ideas on identity politics, bodily transfiguration, going the distance to reorient one's biology, towing lines of masculinity and femininity, spitting in eyes of preconceived notions, middle fingers to right-wing naysayers, altering earth walk journey, laps around the axis in a new skin, a renewed mentality, but it goes deeper than flesh, not fodder for short-sighted slings from those uninformed, hormonal modulation, heightened sense of self, realizing scope of personal trajectory, vitals, telemetry monitored, hate speech left as residue and afterburners. You blaze new trails. You fortify new relationships. You further your appreciation for mankind. You accept limitations, but aren't afraid to test your threshold. You gaze into a once fractured mirror and witness shattered pieces repositioning into a newfound whole. You defy gravitational pulls of opinion spectrums. This is your armor, sword unsheathed, brandished blade to wield as you pave a chance at destiny fulfilled.
Hell yeah. Oh my God, so many good parts to that. And like, you're making my my transgender self tingle and also my therapist self tingle at the same time, you know,
Thank you.
with all that inner child shit. Yeah.
Hell yeah. And this is going to be the 5th episode of the OutLoud podcast based on our OutLoud LGBTQ anthology with Red or Green Books, brainchild of Lizzie Strauss, who is also here today as one of our hosts. You've met my other host, Starchild, and Dougie Fresh, we like to call him. And I am Shaki G, the poet, your favorite poet. You just don't know it. And today we are talking about gender and sexuality. So before we get into that, we do want to speak on exactly what it is that we are talking about. So we do have some definitions here in regards to the two. Somebody would like to read those off.
Yeah, the definitions? Or
They're in the Google Doc. I can read them. I got it up.
okay, yeah, go right ahead.
All right. So first off, we have gender. As you heard from the beautiful poetry we had in the beginning. Being a spectrum. So gender and identity is each person's internal and individual experience of gender. It is a person's sense of being a man, a woman, both, neither, or anywhere along the gender spectrum. Person's gender identity may be the same as or different from their birth assigned sex. Sex is the anatomical classification as people as male, female, or intersex, usually assigned at birth. Okay, so a lot of people get them confused, so we did want to go over both. All right. In my research, I found there to be a list of about 10 genders on the spectrum. However, there are more, but that does include, outside of the binary, you have your anatomical sex, cisgender, transgender, cishet, non-binary, intersex, gender queer, gender fluid, gender expansive, agender, gender void, bigender, omnigender, pangender, and two-spirit were the genders that I found on the list. So a large difference there. So with that being said, let's have a discussion on that. What does gender and identity mean to you guys?
So the more I hear about it, the more I resonate with Omni, because I'm not just in the middle, I'm across the spectrum. And part of that is like, in my kind of self-definition, I don't use this label pathologically for myself, but I think of myself as a system of I've identified 7 different identities that are part of that. And that's just using internal family system. Like, I'm an internal family systems therapist. So it's not like, I'm not talking about it as a disorder, but just that there are different parts of me that are more female and different parts of me that are more male. And it's a pretty full spectrum for me.
Anyone else?
I mean, I say gender queer for myself most of the time, but I just feel everything. We have to have labels for society, right? To adapt to, which is frustrating sometimes, that we can't just be like, I'm me. And sometimes I feel this and sometimes I feel that, where, it's the same in sexuality, right? And I feel very queer. I just say I'm queer. That's just my label. I'm just queer in my sexuality, in my gender, because I have so many identities. I'm woman, I'm male, I'm non-binary, I'm Jewish, I'm Buddhist, I'm a lesbian. I sometimes feel more pansexual. It just depends on what's happening in life every day, right? I mean, part of my identity is a poet, part of my identity is realtor, part of my identity is a sports person, an athlete. So you can't pinpoint identity. It's all, they say it best actually on Sex and the City. And it's my favorite show of all time. And I was watching it recently, and they have an episode, and the episode's probably close to 20 years old at this point, but it still holds up. And one of the characters goes, gender is an illusion, and so is sexuality. Because it is, right? But we're very attached to our anatomy, which is valid. I mean, I'm very attached to my anatomy, just as anyone else might be, who has gender euphoria. People with gender dysphoria might not feel as connected to anatomy, right? It's a very different thing. But, society has us cling, which is the word I'm going to use, to our anatomy, where we sometimes can't feel safe and free to explore all different types of identities, which doesn't just stem from sexuality and gender. It stems to religion. It stems to our professional life and our platonic friendships. It's just, and if we're able to squash all that, right, and just be us and not have to label ourselves, if everyone just felt secure in being they, right, just plural. And Star Child said it a couple months ago on, I think it was the 3rd or 4th episode. They said, we're all plural. Because we are all plural. We can't deny that. You're not plural, then you're just sitting on a couch, just staring at a TV 24/7, right? That's to me not plural. But so it's so different. It's hard to pinpoint like, oh, there's this, there's that, there's this. We're all just evolving at different paces. Sadly, some are not evolving as quickly as others, which does not help society moving forward. But we all just kind of are a little more flexible about, understanding different lifestyles, different ways of life, different ways to present ourselves, right? Because we're comfortable, pushing ourselves to learn new forms of poetry. Why aren't we comfortable, presenting in a certain way, right? What's the stop? We're comfortable trying to run a 7-minute mile versus a 9-minute mile. But why aren't we comfortable seeing someone who might have been assigned male at birth wear a dress if they feel comfortable wearing a dress? Why can't we push those boundaries, which shouldn't even be boundaries or limitations, should just be life? So that's how I look at it.
All right.
Um,
So
Yeah.
I would agree with. I think you really hit the nail on the head there. I don't know. For me, I don't know. I've always been. I've always been. I guess if you had to label, would probably be cisgender. I mean, I've always, I've never fluctuated in terms of knowing who I was in that respect. However, I've had other, I've always been an ally of the community. I have had a lot of, friends, a lot of my, I've had, there have been relationships in my life where I've actually witnessed when a lot of people go through transitions, and they've spoken about it in actually in a lot of the ways that Lizzie had touched on, in that they were doing it because they felt as though it was like something that they were kind of like, I guess in their own perspective, that they were like sort of called on to do it because it felt right in terms of their mentality. I think it's also like a state of consciousness. And that's kind of what my poem was touching on, in that, in that basically it's kind of like, if you were to go through that particular process, it does renew your mentality. It does change. It kind of like modulates who you are as you go throughout the world. And I think I have like two, at least I can name at least two or three like solid friends who've gone through a transition, or they identify outside of the heteronormative spectrum, and it's something that I've had pretty deep discussions about. Actually, it's not something that I'm not in tune with. I'm totally. It's something that I've actually wanted to actually dive deeper more into in terms of my own knowledge base, like just for myself. But in terms of my own journey, I have traditionally identified as male. I have traditionally identified as a heterosexual male. However, that does not limit my scope of my understanding or my want to understand other perspectives and other ways of living life that are outside of my own. And I think it's critical to kind of not be so stringent in your to not put those strictures up, because once you do that, it disables your ability from relating to another person. It kind of cuts off your relatedness. And I think if more people were to like let their guards down, and to be more more open and accepting, I think conversations, and I think the world at large would probably go in a much more in a much more conducive and cohesive and positive direction. Frankly.
Yeah, I want to jump in. Is that okay?
Yeah, go right ahead.
Uh,
Go right ahead.
Cool. So yeah, letting your guard down. So basically, like the person I'm becoming is the person I would have been if my 7-year-old version of myself had not been shamed into pulling back and repressing my full star child. Because like Star Child is the name that I used the first time I had the ability to choose my own name in an internet chat room back in 1989. And then I forgot about it for years, and then I heard George Clinton's song, Mothership Connection, where he says, Star Child. I was like, Daddy just called me my name. But, because George Clinton, my chocolate daddy. But anyway, yeah, so like, I'm just being who I would have been if there had been no queer phobia, if I'd not run into queer phobia, just the natural trajectory of my spirit. That's all that it is. It's not, I'm trying to do this trendy thing or something like that, because I suspected myself of that for years. Like I was like, oh, you're just trying to jump on the bandwagon because now trans is cool, so you're just doing that. And so I was like, no, I can't tell people that my pronouns are they, them, because it's trendy, and my autism doesn't let me do things that are trendy. Because if my autism says if you're doing it because it's trendy, then it's inauthentic, and we don't do inauthenticity. And so so it took me for a long time to be like, oh, actually this fits, and like specifically the non-binary kind of thing fits, but omni fits better, It's just like you're finding what fits, And the thing is, when I talked to my mom, I said, Mom, because she said, I love you, but I don't understand it. And I said, you don't have to understand it. Just think of me as a man who has a feminine side that he's comfortable with. It's totally cool if my mom wants to see me that way. Now, my dad, I'm not going to show him I took some photos in rainbow booty shorts and a feather boa, on Thursday night, and I did not show those to my father, and I will never. Maybe I will someday. Maybe when he indicates that he's able to be invited into that part of my life, then I'll come out to him. But for now, I'm just his weird son. He knows that I'm weird. He doesn't know exactly how weird I am, but and whatever, I guess for me, and I think it's just the generation that I'm in. I don't need for people to call me sibling or, not gender me male. It doesn't bother me. I totally respect that other people are in different situations and with different understandings. And I want to just honor people, whatever they say to call them. That's what I call them, because that's what being a fucking friend is. You just call people what they tell you to call them. You don't argue with them about how they identify themselves. I mean, that's crazy, And so, yeah.
And
But anyway,
that gets into our next point on pronouns and the importance of pronouns. And I thought this would be a fun one to talk about, because myself, if I had to, I guess I would just say that I'm pronoun fluid. I'm not the type of person to say my pronouns are this, that. It never really mattered to me, but there are people that do. So I want to know your guys' view on pronouns and why you think they are important.
Yeah, so something I'm just going to say, there are two big R words that are going through my head right now. One is repression and one is respect. The world is just still completely repressed, especially this country. This nation is completely repressed, because in many other nations, they really don't care what you do and who you do and how you live your life. This nation still has a very big problem with it, because this nation wants me to be married to a man, raising children, identifying as female only, making babies, making food, and maybe having a part-time job in what they dictate, right? They don't want me to explore anything else. Well, I'm not going to do that. That's not what I want. If someone wants that, that's their choice. And people want to do that, as long as they value everyone as equally, that's their choice. But that's not what I want. Then there's respect, which gets into pronouns. It's not as much about pronouns as just people are using these labels and these pronouns to make society more accepting. Because eventually, we're not going to have to do this. If you talk to children and they say, I have a friend and their name is this, they're saying there because they understand that. Not, they might see someone who presents male and automatically think the pronouns are he, him, his, and their objective pronouns. So my pronouns are she, zir for society, because she is to show my anatomy, which I'm still very connected to, and zir is for my lineage. I'm very connected to my German, Galician, Jewish lineage. That's where zir comes from. But I'm just a they. I'm just plural. I'm just they. I mean, I love my pronouns. They are me. They're a part of me. But I'm just they. And when I walk around sometimes with my hair up and a baseball cap forward and someone says, Mister, fine. I don't care. So you can call me Mister. At least I'm not saying, hey, asshole. I won't be called that, right? You can call me a fuckface, an asshole, a this, a that. That I'm a problem with. But you don't call me Mister, Miss. Not hey you, that's kind of rude, right? But that's fine. It doesn't bother
Yeah, I
me.
think that
What? I didn't hear what Star Trail said. Sorry. And that
sorry about that. The connection kind of went wonky for a second.
that's okay. Well, I was just saying, like, that's what I say. I see respect and I see repression. So if you're already pushing back against society in one way, or are you ready to push back another way? Because, you know, in religion, there's another R word. And I'm very religious. I'm very spiritual. But I don't listen to the people in my religion. I'm Jewish and I'm Buddhist. That's my belief. That tell me I can't be who I am. I just don't associate with them. I do me. I practice how I want my religion. I'm a humanist. I make sure I understand why other people believe in their system, in their higher beings. I don't tell them they can't. If I have questions, I am respectfully asking them as much as I can to understand why. If it's something that I can't see where they're going to value me equally or other people equally, I don't associate myself with them. Right? It's not a healthy way to live life. You just cut. I mean, it's better for me to just cut people out and disassociate from them, because I'll give you a first chance, a second chance. After that, I'm like, you're not going to evolve. It's very obvious in how they present themselves, their body language, their communications, just their face lines, if they want to evolve or not. So that's just how I feel about pronouns. And there are people that, like Star Trail said, think it's very trendy. It's not trendy. It's just becoming more accepted for people to explore their identities safely. It's not trendy. Nothing is trendy. I mean, maybe fashion is trendy sometimes, right? And different things, but it's not trendy for someone to change on their Instagram they. That's a lot of gender euphoria, and that can be very scary for someone because we're still living in this repressed time. Right? That's how I feel about that.
I think an important thing to name is that trans femme people specifically are scapegoats, because like you don't see people like in the right wing trying to say that trans mask people are like trying to like are potential pedophiles and stuff like that, because there's something that really scares people about a man who behaves effeminately, because it's like, oh well, you're because you're feminine, then you must be like going after children, and that it's almost like, I would almost say that the well, at least what I've encountered in the evangelical religious spaces that I still intersect with, it's like gender, like trans is much more reviled than having a different sexual orientation. And I think that what is reviled about gayness for like white patriarchy is the femininity, like in some ways, like, and I mean, I don't want to say that too absolutely, but like, and so yeah, and so basically, I really like my journey into pronouns. I was a college minister, and I had some people who went by they them, and it was like a new thing. And at first, I was grumbling on the inside because I was an English major, and I was like, but how can how can an individual person be a they? Because I didn't realize that I was plural yet, um, and so yeah, so I had some grumbling on the inside, but I was just like, okay, that's what you want to be called. That's cool. Like I just absolutely do not understand why. And I mean, okay, I do understand why. Because in evangelical theology that I came from, there's an assumption that people can't trust their own intuition, and that we're innately totally depraved. And so when a kid has an idea about themselves that they believe emphatically, you're supposed to basically push it out of them, repress it out of them. And I mean, I love my father, and he tried really hard to make me not feminine, you know, because he didn't want me to be bullied. You know, like he that's what he thought. And so, but what ended up happening is that his voice got in my head, and I spent 45 years getting his voice out of my head, so I could finally step out. And that's like, that's where I am now. Is I'm finally like coming into my full self because I'm not still listening to the voice of my father saying, "Stop that! Don't do that! Don't touch that." You know.
Okay. So my next question is because looking through the list of neo pronouns and things like that, there are pronouns outside of the ones that we have mentioned. And I wanted to get your guys' thoughts on it because a lot of it is used for right-wingers to make fun of people using pronouns as well. And on the list, they have pronouns like Fae and Fae Self, if you believe that you are an anime character, Vamp or Vamp Self, Bee or Bee Self, Kitty or Kitty Self, and other objects. And my question is, at what point, where do we draw the line in the LGBTQIA community, right? Because it started out about sexuality, moving into gender and identity, and now just moving into other aspects of identity, like whether or not you think you're a vampire. And it goes down this line where, and it always goes down the line when you're listening to right-wing media, eventually it's going to be bestiality, pedophilia. Like, where do we draw the line to tell someone that their identity is no longer valid?
So
It's like, I mean, oh, sorry, go ahead, Lizzie.
No, go ahead, Star Child. I'll go now.
Yeah, so like, so what you're talking about, like Fae and vampire stuff, that sounds like a neurodivergent versus neurotypical divide, as opposed to just gender and sexuality. Like that's the next frontier, basically, is when being playful and nerdy, and writing your own story and writing, like, defining yourself poetically however you want to, where this kind of line of, well, but that's not your professional identity, you're supposed to use your legal name, because that's official, that's neurotypical culture speaking, where you can't use, you can't put on animal costumes and have sex with people. That's just crazy. Like, that's also obviously a disorder, like, why? Why is it, just because it's weird, just because it's different, and so, I just really, yeah, I mean, I think that, the line, so where's the line? The line is when I leverage my claims about myself in order to harm another human, that is the line, So, like, if I say, oh, well, I'm Zeus, and Zeus gets to rape young maidens, because that's his job as the Greek god, when I start saying crap like that, then no, that's not valid. It's not valid to say that you are a certain way that forces you to cause harm to other people because of your identity.
Yeah, and I agree with that. And the thing is, people that identify as vampire or an animal, I don't, as far as I know, they don't identify within the LGBTQ plus community. But if they do, the people I know who identify as that have never been disrespectful towards the LGBTQ community. I think it's just, first of all, if someone I was dating was like, oh, identify as this and a vampire, I'm like, that's kind of hot for me. I mean, if it doesn't turn someone else on, to each their own. But it doesn't mean I want to be with a vampire per se. It's more of like a fantasy, right? What we have in the privacy of our relationships, right, with that person or partners. And same if someone walks around in an animal tail, that doesn't mean bestiality. That doesn't mean you want to fuck a raccoon if they have a raccoon tail. It might just be kind of fun in the moment. To me, I mean, if there are, I mean, I'm not into bestiality. It's not for me. I don't think it should be illegal for people being to bestiality. I think that's animal abuse and a whole other thing. But people running around in animal costumes or identify as a cat or wear a tail, I don't see that as bestiality. I see that as it within the demisexual community, which does stem into the LGBT community, but it's not harmful. Because demigods and demisexuality is very interesting, demigender. So, but I obviously, when right-wing people and ultra conservatives start to say, oh, it's this, oh, it's that, they are not, oh, hopefully it was just a technical issue for them, but that they got booted out. But when people who are not, like I've said, are that repressed, not willing to evolve, not willing to have these conversations that we're having, which is a healthy conversation we're having. No one's fighting, no one's yelling at each other. We're having an adult, mature conversation, right? That you start to understand. And if someone says to you, identify as a cat, it's okay to nicely ask them, can you explain to me why you identify as a feline? Don't badger them. Don't question it in a harmful way, right? Star Child's word, harmful. Nicely, calmly ask them, could you explain that to me? That's not ambushing someone. Now, if someone feels like they're being ambushed, that's a whole other thing. They need to, there's some psychological stuff going on there, but it's not harmful. Like if someone were to ask me why I call myself queer, I'm happy to explain that to them. Not that it's anyone's business, because I'm never going to ask someone why they identify as a cat. I'm never going to ask someone why they identify as heterosexual. I'm never going to ask someone why they identify as a lesbian. That's their business. If they're harming people, maybe I will. But when I don't see there's harm and it's just for them, who cares? As my grandmother would say, it's no one's business. My grandmother must make her memory be a blessing, but my grandmother would be like, it's no one's business. Exactly. And I wanted to just screen share for a second something. So thank you for giving me access to that. Shocky is, Star Child was talking about neurodivergent, how that's a spectrum, because we're all on the spectrum of neurodivergent. That's why it's a spectrum. That's why that word is there. And we're all on a spectrum of gender, and we're all on a spectrum of sexuality. And for those that aren't familiar with this is the Kinsey scale that Alfred Kinsey created, the scientist, back in the late 40s. And as you can see, 0 is kind of like exclusively heterosexual, could also relate to asexuality. And then 6 is someone who's usually identifies as solely homosexual, but also very clear, very comfortable exploring many different identities. That's the word I'm going to use. Just exploring many different identities and values. And then there's the varying response, right? And I truly believe that we're all somewhere on here. Now, I can't speak for someone and say if they're 0 or 6, but I think that most people, including myself, are between like a 2 and a 5. Most. And I'm not speaking for anyone in particular, but that's how, the more people do their research, the more people are more comfortable with vocabulary, especially in our art, right? We're all poets here. The more we're willing to use range, there's another word that starts with an R, range, that we will leave a better future. Isn't that what we want to do? We want to leave a better future. Like I said earlier, the younger generation doesn't have a problem with someone's pronouns, doesn't have a problem with someone's identity. They just go with the flow, right? And we're kind of that internet generation, right? A lot of us millennials, where we just kind of took to the internet, and we took to AOL, and we took to Gmail, and we figured it out, right? And then our parents' generation kind of still is navigating that. Well, we're above the generation that is comfortable navigating these healthy conversations about identity. Why can't the generations that have come before them be that same way? So that's how I feel about it. And sometimes a visual helps, which is why I shared that. So thank you for letting me share that. But
Yeah.
the more that we just, it's like I said, when I first unmuted myself, the more we kind of start to disassociate from labels and just mind our own business sometimes, research, but mind our own business sometimes. we're gonna leave a better future.
And
Can I jump in on this a little bit? Let me jump in. I've in terms of being part of the arts community, it's like, particularly performance poetry. I've seen a lot of I've seen in slams. Like I was at a slam. I competed in a slam recently, and gender and sexuality is actually a primary topic that a lot of slam poets tend to perform about. And I find that really fascinating to me because it's like, either because I think gender identity and sexual identity can also be kind of it can be it can be like a political thing, or it can be something that can really spark an audience's mind, especially if they're uninformed about the particulars of it. And I think that's why it makes for such I think that's why it makes it so topical, and why it's used so widely in the performance poetry community. Like, in fact, when I went to this particular slam, I think one of the finalists did a piece surrounding that, and I thought, and it really resonated with the crowd, and I was wondering if a bulk of the audience was thinking, like, did they really know the specifics behind what that particular poet was referencing? Because, like, in this conversation, there are a lot of there is a lot of like vocabulary that there, and some of it can get somewhat dense in terms of the explanatory background behind it. And I was wondering if, like, as I was watching and as I was engaging in the scene, if the majority of the audience was really latching onto what that poet was saying, and it seemed like they were. Even though it's like being judged out of like a 1 to, like it's being judged out of a point system, out of a 30 score. So it's like that particular poet, I think, got close to 30. And I think because it's based on like content and performance, and that poet really weaved in a lot of these nuances that we're speaking about. And I think it's just really important to kind of keep it as the basis of continued conversation. And I think that's what the best kind of art does, whether it's visual, spoken, written. So I think it should be like an ongoing, something that should be ongoing. And I think the conservative aspect of it, I think those on that side of the spectrum, I think will wind up kind of not necessarily switching camps, or if there are camps or divides, but I think it'll be more accessible and accepted by them, and maybe they'll come around in terms of like the generational, as Lizzie pointed out, when it comes to generations. I think, our generation grew up in the information age. So we had all these things. I mean, we had all this information accessible to us, and we still do. And it's like, I think prior generations didn't necessarily have that. So their views are might be still more antiquated, and
So can I jump in?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Cool. Yeah. So like with generations, it's just because I just wrote a song, or I'm starting to write a song called "The Founding Fathers Dressed Like Drag Queens," because they fucking did. The Founding Fathers dressed like drag queens. They wore makeup, they wore wigs, they drank their tea from dainty French cups. I mean, like, let's be real. Femininity and masculinity has not had a fixed definition throughout history. And so what conservative people, they take the mantle of, oh, we're just doing what our forefathers did. No, you're defining the playing field in a very specific way. And I think I've said this before on here, but what I really believe is that all of this, like the cisgender hetero patriarchy, a lot of it is structured the way it is because of white supremacy and because of the need to be able to say, we're doing things the right way in our community. We men know how to be men and women know how to be women. And in these other, people of color communities, they're mixed up or whatever, like, I don't know. I just, I feel like there's racial elements to it. And it's like not, like, but not trying to be corrective or anything of what you're saying. Like, I mean, I think that within the scope of, the 20th century, we're living in the kind of post 60s consensus, like, and it sucks. Like, we need to break out of this like Reagan era of, because it's like Reagan's shadow has been cast over the last, like, my entire lifetime, and it's just time to break out of that and not have those binaries, like the specific definition of like what left and what right looks like that we've had for 40 years. Like, that shit needs to be drop kicked out.
Yeah, and I'm just gonna say,
Agreed.
Yeah,
oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Star Child, but something I was gonna say is one of the consultants on this show, Jacob R. Moses, posted today, and it was really important what he posted. He wrote, "It's not left and right anymore, it's backwards and forwards." Because truly, if you think about it, I mean, because right, we kind of camps, that's a word that's been thrown around, right, this last few minutes. Left wing, right wing. Well, who's willing to evolve and who's not? It's really that. And I thought that was very important that Jacob shared that, and I reshared it on my social media. And the people that are willing to grasp it will, and the people that will roll their eyes will roll their eyes, and they'll stay in the camp of people who want to stay backwards and not the people who want to stay forwards. Right? Because it just truly is that way. It's sad, right? How many people just want to stay in their little bubble.
Mm-hmm.
And so that brings me to my last question. I'm sorry, I know we only have 8 minutes. Because it says like being forward and backwards, or knowledge and, ignorant, if you would. But then labels get thrown in there, like transphobic, heterophobic, things like that, if you are not. And so my question has to do with like preferences when it comes to trans, our trans brothers and sisters. And it's the post-op versus pre-op discussion. Because I've been seeing a lot where people say, if you like women, but you do not date a trans woman, then you are hetero or you are transphobic. And it's for someone like me, and I am LGBTQ, right? It seems ostracizing because I like women. I don't like penis. Men are great. I don't like penis. So for me to be with someone who is pre-op would not make sense. But then that's me invalidating them as a woman. I want to know your guys' thoughts on this.
It's a hard conversation for a lot of people to have because of that world we're still living in. I guess it could be seen as transphobic, and if you don't want to be with someone who is pre-op because you're not attracted to their genitalia. But at the same time, so I've been with both genitalias, so I may not be the right person to comment on that because I don't have a problem dating someone who is trans feminine or trans masculine. That doesn't bother me. But I think that I kind of wish people would move past that. I mean, I might be attracted to one genitalia over another in my more recent years, but I'm not against dating someone who has male genitalia because, at the end of the day, we're all really pansexual. At the end of the day, you're gonna be attracted to, you're attracted to, and it's kind of like it's grasping. We're grasping. We're not trying to scare people. We're just grasping. It's a little brain word in there. There you go. Everyone's very pansexual at the end of the day. And it's a matter because like I could meet someone who identifies as cis male heterosexual this week. And I'm like, well, I haven't had a connection with someone like that in a very long time. But if they really said all the right things, am I willing to look past the fact they might not have female genitalia? Yeah. But it's, for me, the female genitalia goes with the female brain most of the time, which is why I'm closer on the Kinsey scale to a 6 and use lesbian and queer as my identity, right? So it's a matter, it's a lot of it's very cerebral. It's all science, right? So, that's how I look at it, but it can be perceived as slightly, I'm saying slightly, transphobic for people that don't date people who, in my opinion, don't date people pre-op because they can't kind of.
So if I can jump in as a trans femme person, so basically now I'm middle-aged, I'm new in my journey, so I'm not trying to invalidate anyone else and people who are more, kind of in a different place on the spectrum than I am. But when I see people making these kinds of claims on social media, that like if you will not, have sex with me, basically, then you're transphobic. I'm going to police your desires and like your preferences. Like, no, it's it's like, I mean, that's where I think that in this world where the algorithm is like our god, and we have to come up with something that's really clever and like super edgy that gets to get the big likes and the shares and stuff like that on social media. Like, that's what I see going on there, is somebody trying to make take a really radical stance so they can get people riled up and boost their platform, and I don't know. I know I shouldn't presume that about people, but like, I'm just saying from my perspective, I don't want to tell anyone else what their preferences should be. I don't want to be told what my preferences have to be. Like, I stop all the policing.
I think I do think there's preference. People are entitled to their preferences, of course, but I do think when people have this connection and then they find out someone might be pre-op and they're like, oh no,
okay,
that's what I mean. That's what I mean by that. It's like, like, you've had this amazing connection, you're head over heels, and the one thing that might stop you is that they're pre-op.
You don't think sex is an important part of a relationship?
Of course it is, and for me it's a very important part of a relationship, but I'm saying, like, give it a shot. I mean, if you give it a shot and like you just can't, but like, I mean, I can't tell people what to do, right? Everyone's their own individual. I'm not telling people they have to go have sex with someone with a different genitalia, but I'm just saying, for me, I was comfortable exploring it. I'm not policing people. I'm not telling other people what to do. I'm just saying, like, if I had that intense of a connection with someone, okay, like, let me retry it. And if it really was something that was not working for me, that's a conversation I'll have after, but I don't want to make that prejudgment call if I feel that intense cerebral connection, if that makes sense. Like, I'm talking for myself, and yes, I'm talking a little bit for society, but I can see why that would be seen as transphobic. Or if someone finds out that they're dating someone who is attracted to men, but then they find out they're bi, well, they're with me right now. How does their past really matter when they're with? I mean, it matters, but how does it affect me right now? So that's what I'm saying. It's
yeah. I think that's a really good clarification. Like, you're saying, I'm talking for myself, and I think what I'm hoping is that we can kind of maintain a space where, like, specifically, like, the acknowledgement that there are issues like that where there are valid points coming from multiple directions, and there's not, like, we don't have to resolve it into one right answer where, like, we have the perfectly correct stance or something like that. Like, that's kind of okay. So that's my position. Is just that there are multiple ways of thinking about it are possible, and I just don't want people to, tell me that I'm not allowed to say that I'm feminine. and that's for me. It's not so much that I need to be called a woman because I'm in the middle and both and stuff like that. And so, but I can understand how someone, who's like if someone who's a trans woman, full on trans woman is, could feel invalidated if these kinds of things are being talked about in the abstract, like, but when we talk at the level of like actual personal relationships, and like, well, I like people with brown eyes, better than people who, I don't know. It's just,
Yeah, I mean, of
yeah.
course, people are attracted to what they're physically attracted to. Obviously, I'm physically attracted to different features than, other people, because that's how my biology works versus someone else.
Right, but I think there are like
Cool.
I think, as you guys both pointed out, there are like societal dictations that happen that kind of put pressure on particular people to kind of conform to a certain way of thinking or way of believing. And I think that's the real, I mean, I think that's like that can cause a lot of calamity, because it's like, you don't like, it's kind of like the herd mentality. It's like what like 10 other people ahead of you were thinking or believing or doing or experiencing, and then you kind of lose sight of your own like there are some people who can lose sight of their own individuality because it might not be the prevailing accepted, like de facto thing, but then it's, what I'm saying? So it causes, it can kind of cause someone to kind of like question themselves, but at the same time, I think that exploration is necessary. But in terms of being attracted to somebody, it's like I think there are certain, like, I don't know, I guess there are certain aspects of that person that can be like a deal breaker, not necessarily the genitalia thing, but like other aspects of that person. So I think we have to treat each characteristic of each person in kind of a similar light. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
It's also a matter just of communication. I mean,
yeah, exactly.
If someone is saying, if you're interested in someone and they're maybe not comfortable right away communicating their pre-op, and it comes up, and
Right,
you're
comes
like,
up.
oh, I really didn't know you were pre-op, and that's like a big deal breaker for me. You gotta remember how you're communicating that. That's rude and mean, and this person might be struggling with gender dysphoria. So
Right.
I think it's just a matter of, navigating those waters. It's all personal relationships, obviously, but for me, as someone who's been with both sexes, I'm always willing to be a little more flexible, depending on how strong the cerebral connection is with someone.
Agreed. Like, for instance,
Well,
like
I love how you said,
Yeah.
it's all about personal relationships.
Yeah.
Like,
Thank
it
you.
is.
getting this into the personal and out of the abstract. Like, yes.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, I mean, we can agree that gender identity, all of it is a tough subject, and it's nothing that everyone is always going to agree on. We would like them to, right? But I think the main bottom line here is to just respect each other, respect each other's wishes, respect each other, how we, they, them identify themselves, and making a space for everyone and their beliefs. So with that said, we have come to the end of our hour. So again, thanks for joining us with OutLoud. Please go to Red or Green Books to get your copy of the OutLoud LGBTQ literary anthology, written by many members of the community. A great collection. So definitely look into that. And I do want to thank my co-host for showing up today and talking to me about this deep subject. So thank you.
Thanks, Shockey.
Thanks a lot. Yeah.
Good night.
All right. Night, guys.
All right. And there is, oops, how do I stop the live?